Let's finish up the modeling portion of this guy. We'll be doing that body, hands, and hair in this video. Look at the chapters in the play bar to skip to each section. Step 1 of dealing with the body is connecting all these parts together. This is what we downloaded the Loop Tools add-on for, so if you didn't download it at the start of the series, do it now. Let's show it off by connecting the feet to the legs, which is probably the easiest part of this. The key thing to know during this whole process is how to match up the number of vertices of one loop to match that of another loop. For example, right at the end of the leg, if we alt select the loop, we can count that there are 8 verts here, but in the bottom right corner of the whole Blender window, you can see some little gray text. It tells you some info about what you have selected. In this section, it tells us that we have 8 verts selected. So let's look at the feet. There's a face in the way, so select it and delete faces. If we select the new loop, we see we only have 4 verts selected. So how do we add more verts to make it match the leg? Easy. Just add loops to the side with Ctrl R, and when you click, you can see that there's now 6 total verts in that loop, since the loop we added goes around the bottom of the foot and back to the other side. We want to spread out the geometry overall, so now add a loop to the front instead, which will do the same, and now we're up to 8 verts. And since this is a simple enough situation, they're even in a similar enough position. But it would be nice if the foot's loop was a circle too. That's where Loop Tools comes in. Select the foot loop, and then in the right bar, go to the Edit tab, where at the bottom, you can see the add-on added a section for itself. These are the little buttons it gives us. So guess what? You can just click the circle button, and it'll turn any loop you've selected into a perfect circle. Just think about how annoying that would have been to do it manually, even with something like the Smooth tool. That relief is why you get add-ons. And it has another useful button. Select the leg loop as well with a Shift-Alt-click. And then we can just press the bridge button, and it instantly fills in the faces to connect these 2 areas. It's definitely convenient, but I'm going to teach you the other method of doing it too, because you'll learn some nice shortcuts for other purposes. If you select 2 verts on the foot loop, and then the parallel 2 verts on the leg loop, you can press F to fill in a face within the 4 verts you have selected. Even better, now that the face is there, let's just select the 2 verts on one of its sides, and we can press F again, and it'll fill in another face in that direction. And since it already has the next side selected, we can just spam F until it's gone all the way around the loop, and it'll seal itself up. Obviously, you might as well use the bridge button in this scenario, but the F key is super necessary for modeling some other parts, so it's good to know. Now to connect the legs to the torso, it's kind of the same situation as the foot. Let's add a loop to the front and to the side. And now we can delete the new vert in the middle. But we do actually want to have some sort of crotch there too. Delete the vert that's not even attached to any faces in the middle so we can deal with this. What I like to do here is select the edge in front and the parallel edge in the back, and then go into side view with numpad 3. If the leg is too high, turn on X-ray like before so you can see this area. Now extrude downward, and we can even scale it in a bit so it comes inward. Then we need one more extrusion, but we actually want this new edge to be fused together in the middle, so select both sides verts, and M to merge at the center. If you do have the whole edge selected, it'll fuse both full edges into a single vert, so you have to do each vert one at a time. Now look, we have a new loop for the leg to connect to, which is 8 verts around. First, let's press the circle button so it'll match the leg. Now you should probably manually move them closer to where the leg's verts are. So you can just bridge the gap and smooth it out. Now those parts are nicely connected, but since I'm going to rig this character later, let's do some other quick things. First, we need to make sure the feet are right below the torso, so the leg is going straight down. If your feet are too big and are getting glued together in the center because of the mirror modifier, you can move them just slightly apart, and it should be fine. But you can also turn off clipping, move them to where they should go, and then re-enable clipping, and they'll stay apart as long as you don't move them back across each other. Then we need to add some more loops to the leg itself. Ctrl R over the leg, then scroll up so we're adding 3 loops. The middle loop will be our new knee, but we need a couple more loops around it for reasons I'll explain in the rigging video. But an easy way to increase loops is to use the bevel tool. If you select the knee loop and then select the bevel tool and pull on this pin, you'll see it splits the loop in 2. But we actually want to keep one loop for the middle, so while holding the pin, scroll up once to add that loop back in. That'll make sure the leg and knee will maintain their shape when the knee bends, once we get to that. Lastly, add a subdiv modifier and shade smooth, so we can select the edge of the crotch and the leg, and add an edge crease of 1 there, so it's less smooth. Let's make some quick edits to the foot. It's not the most necessary, but you'll probably want to add a loop around the side, so it flattens out a bit that way, and slide it down so the bottom of the foot is flatter. Then let's select the toe section of that loop and Alt-S to scale it out. I'm just adding a bunch of creases around the foot to make notches wherever I think it will look good, like on and above the toes. Then select the loop that goes all the way around the sole of the foot, and then add a crease there too, so it flattens out. I realized it doesn't look as good as my test model, so I looked back to see what I did there. It really doesn't matter that much, so I forced myself to stop. I also added another loop around the ankle so it'll bend better when we rig it. Really quick, let's do the neck. Since the head and body have the same modifiers, click the head, then the body, then Ctrl J to join them back together. This will mess up the shrink wrap modifier on the eyebrow, so make sure to set that to the body now, since the head is a part of the body. I'll add some more loops horizontally, so it gets some of its shape back from the subdiv modifier. Since we added a loop across the whole body for the legs, we actually have a perfect section to extrude out a neck here at the top. Select this vert in the middle top, and delete vertices. Then just select a loop and extrude upwards. After one extrusion, make sure to press circle on the loop tools buttons so it rounds out. Then extrude up into the base of the head. Again, since this character is so stylized, we can get away with the neck just colliding with the head like this. If you really want to connect the two for real though, delete a single vert, like before, wherever you want the neck to connect to. Select both loops, then press Bridge in Loop Tools. You can also add a crease where they join too. Now the arms. Let's actually disable the subdiv modifier so it's easier to see the original faces. The hands are a beast we'll tackle later, so just ignore all that for now. Let's get the shoulder dealt with. First, we have enough loops vertically, but not horizontally. Let's add 2 loops to the side. Now we can delete the middle vert and we have a nice connection point like before. Make it a circle and then bridge across. That's fine. It works completely fine. You can add 3 loops and then bevel the elbow loop like before, and it's all fine. But this is a tutorial, so I'm going to teach you something special that'll work better when we rig it. This is more or less optional, but it is a good principle to learn. We should actually build out a little extra shoulder here, since the special topology it'll create will mimic real life just a bit more than if we plainly stuck a tube into the shoulder socket. I think it isn't too crazy of a method though. First, we need another loop, but above the other middle loop we made. Since we cut a hole here, you need to add it to the back as well. Take these 3 verts to the top of the loop, and then pull them out a little. Now select the top 5 verts like this, and then extrude downward. Then merge this corner vert and the middle vert of the last loop on both sides. Now the new hole is still 8 verts around, since we've got this sort of shoulder pad thing going on here. The tricky part will be getting it in a good place, so it'll connect with the arm right. I usually build out characters in an A pose instead of a T pose, so I don't have to deal with this that much. So let's convert this to an A pose really quick. Just select the arm and hand with L, and then in the front view with numpad 1, rotate them down so they'll at least be a little bit closer to where the new shoulder hole connects. Now we could just select both loops and bridge. It looked like it screwed up a little since we connected the wrong verts together, but you could untwist it by going down to this little twist number in the bottom right and changing it until it's how it should be. We should smooth it out after we add the extra loops to the arm. Just do it like with the leg, where we add 3 loops and bevel out the middle loop, scrolling up to add back in the elbow loop we need. That looks pretty good, and I'm going to keep it like this. The only differences between a T and A pose are super minute, so let's just keep it like this. It no longer follows the reference, but since we'll be modeling the hand separately anyway, you don't actually need it until we get to the hair. The last step for the body is just to edit it to make it how you want. I'm going to use the Sculpt Mode Smooth tool at a low strength to smooth out the upper chest area. And then just pull things around with proportional editing until it either fits the reference or looks how you want it otherwise. I'll also add a crease around the waist of the body so that area is more exaggerated. You can control click when you have a vert selected to select a line of verts that'll lead you to your second selection. I use that one a lot. You can also add a crease to the center edge of the back if you want that sort of back crease, but I don't, so I won't do it. The last crease I'll add is right on the shoulder pad, since I like the look. For some reason, I like the look of the body I made for the test model more, but when I look back, I can't tell much of a difference. So just know that your brain always pulls stupid stuff like that on you. You can always just take a break and come back later to edit it, since looking at it with fresh eyes tends to make things look better. Making appealing pecs or breasts is actually decently hard to get right, but you can try to make them by selecting the face around that area and extruding out as you need to, probably adding a crease to the bottom and center of the chest. I won't though, since I think this looks good enough. I also realized that he'd look a bit better by shrinking the mouth a bit, and making the eyes a bit smaller and closer together. Never be afraid to go back to older parts of the model and fix them up. Now's the time to take a break and congratulate yourself for all your hard work, because the hands are next. The hands are almost guaranteed to be the hardest part of this project, even compared to rigging. Artists everywhere flinch at the thought of having to deal with them, but there is a pretty decent method I have for making a good starter hand. It won't be the most perfect hand ever, but it'll get you by. First, you obviously need to move the hand reference to a better place. Turn off subdivisions and delete this cube we had in place of the hand, since it doesn't use it at all. Then, since we want to model our hands flat, let's actually take a portion of the wrist and duplicate it and rotate it so it's flat again, moving it to where the wrist is in the reference, so we know exactly how our hand will connect to the wrist once it's done. Now try to position the full hand reference above our wrist, going into top view with numpad 7, and scale it to make sure the wrist size matches. To actually start building out everything, let's add a cylinder set to 8 vertices, and with no cap fill. This will be one of our fingers, so move it to the ring area of one of the fingers. Then duplicate your finger to make each other finger. It's much harder to deal with a full 5-fingered hand, so that's what we're going to do, even though we could get away with a slightly easier 4-fingered cartoony hand. It's the same process though. Do the same for the thumb, but of course it's rotated a bit. Next, go out of top view so we can connect all the fingers on their sides. If everything is lined up right, these 2 edges on the sides should be a great place to add 2 faces between each finger. You might want to spread out the fingers so you can see what you're doing better. You can select them on each side, then press bridge in loop tools to connect them. Do this for each finger. But since the thumb's farther away, let's extrude that edge instead. We can have one loop between the edge of the index finger and the thumb, so it helps maintain its shape a bit. And now, to keep it consistent, let's add that same edge on the other side to the same part of the wrist. We're going to attach the same side of the pinky finger to the other side of the wrist, but let's make sure there's one extra loop on this part of this side of the hand to maintain the shape in the reference. I'm also going to flare out the base of the thumb a bit, since that's how thumbs are. Now for a great lesson to learn when building out models like this. We obviously know we're going to need to fill in the top of the hand with faces, but knowing that, we also know that we need to match the number of verts on each side of this hole, so we can actually bridge it flatly across this gap. We can't perfectly connect these 2 sides otherwise. We already have one loop at the bottom that matches the back side of the thumb, so that's good. But as you can see, there are 3 verts on top that don't have a similar point on the other side. The middle of the thumb, the other side of the thumb, and this extra loop between the thumb and the index finger. So we just need to use Ctrl R and scroll up to add 3 more loops. And then once they're there, we can move them into place so they're parallel with the other side's verts. Now you might have seen a bit of an issue. They've got the size of the hand down right, but look how many verts are on the knuckle side versus the wrist side. That's 12 verts, so we have to match with the 3 verts on the other side. What, are we supposed to add like 5 new loops of the 2 edges on the wrist? They go all the way up the arm, and we don't want that. What are we supposed to do? Well, there are a lot of ways to reduce the vert count down as you go down a model, so let's see some of those ways. The first and the most reliable way to do it is to make this general formation. First, extrude out only one edge on either side, but rotate the new edges inward so they sort of slope into each other. Then F to add a face between them, and then try matching the new amount of verts on the fingers with Ctrl R and scrolling. Here we have 8 verts, not counting the corner bit, so add 8 loops. Now if we select the edge on the inner left here and press F as many times as we need to fill the gap, we reduce the total number of verts down to 10. This method reduces the number of verts going in this direction by 2, while still keeping it using it exclusively quads, or squares, which is generally good topology. Now let's add in a loop around here to match it, and M to merge the corner with the verts on the side. Let's repeat the steps, but using these 2 edges 1 square inward from the outside of the new part. Extrude up, tilt in, add a face across, match the loops with the new verts. Now you have 4, so add 4 loops. And then F to fill in the new gap. Now if you F to fill in the edges, we're down to 8 verts. Repeat the steps, but this time with the edges on the outside. Now we're down to 6, so repeat one more time. Now we have 4, but we still need to go down to 3. So here's another method of reducing verts, just bullshitting it. Extrude out this edge and just merge into each other. It's the easiest way of getting the even number down to an odd one. Now just to be clear, even though this topology could be worse, it's still not the best. But most of the top of the hand is mostly flat, so stuff like this won't be as visible as other places. You can care about better hand topology in the future once you've gotten used to this method. It's probably better to just get it done instead of toiling over it and getting it perfect the first try. Honestly, a good way to get better hand topology is just to have more verts on your arm, so you have to reduce it less. But hey, the best part is that the palm section is exactly the same, so we can select all these faces we just added, duplicate them, and then just move them down to where the palm is, and scale to make the extended area on the bottom, and merge all similar verts. It saves us a lot of time. If you select the finger side of the hand last, you can press M and select at last to make the palm verts move straight to the fingers. The normals will be flipped, so use Shift N or the Alt N menu to recalculate it. Parts like this have always felt like sewing to me. You can scale down on one axis to flatten these areas, and then use the smooth tool to blend it back in with the rest of the hand. Loop Tools also has a flatten button. Now let's polish the fingers a bit. We have to decide whether we want 2 joints for each finger like a real hand, or just having 1 joint in the middle. I think it looks fine with just 1 joint, so we can add 3 loops per finger and then bevel the middle loop and scroll it up to have a middle joint. One side of the finger is a bit jagged, so I'll add them one at a time, and using Loop Tool's flatten button to make them flat. You can bevel 2 separated loops at the same time as well. But if you want 2 joints, then add 5 loops, and then beveling these 2 loops. We're going to need to relax the position of the fingers a bit for rigging, but I'm going to show you the problem that causes before we fix it, so just leave it as is for now. We need to edit the thumb a bit, since it obviously looks a little different than the rest of the fingers. Let's just add 1 loop, and then shrink it in. You'll need to scale it back up at this angle a bit. You can also use Loop Tool's circle button to return it to a circle shape. Now let's add 1 more loop on the base and the outer part, and then beveling the joint. That'll give us the shape we want. Even though we aren't going to relax the other fingers, we should at least let the thumb fall down a bit, since that's usually how the thumb rests. To do this, we can use the 3D cursor as a pivot point. We want the cursor to be right in the middle of the thumb's base, so it rotates right. Select the top and bottom middle vert of the thumb, so this midpoint we see is right in the middle. Then press Shift S to bring out this menu, and then select Cursor to Selected, which will put the cursor right on where that midpoint was. Now we can select the thumb, turn on proportional editing, and then a button away from that, we can change the pivot point of what we have selected, so change it to the 3D cursor. And rotate it down slightly. You don't need to put it down too much, just a tiny bit. This is also the method you'll use for relaxing the rest of the fingers, but you don't have to do that now. Now fill in each fingertip. We could just extrude a new loop and merge the loop into one vert, but there's another function that'll give us slightly better topology. It's not like we really need it, since it's just a fingertip, but it's a good thing to know anyway. Select the loop at the tip, and then in this bar, go to Face, and then Grid Fill. This will fill in the loop you have selected with a grid, as the name suggests. It should fill it in a satisfying way, but sometimes it gets weird for me. So if it looks weird, you can edit the number of loops that span across the grid here and change its offset, which basically rotates the grid it makes. Just make it so it has this satisfying vertical cross going on. Do this for each fingertip, and hopefully it'll save the settings you messed with and won't need any extra editing. Once that's all done, now it's time to just make everything look a bit better. For one, I like pulling out the middle vert on each fingertip so they're slightly more round. You can select each of them and then Alt-S. For creases, I like adding a crease of 0.5 to this top loop of the hand for some reason. I just like having some harder edges instead of making the whole thing perfectly round. I definitely recommend at least adding it to the top of the fingertip, so it kind of mimics a fingernail without having to add a full one in. You can also add it to the bottom side of that loop, as well as the corners of the fingertips if you're aiming for a more squared out kind of hand. All other edits are up to you. Since my guy is so cartoony, I'm going to use Alt-S with proportional editing to make his fingers a bit thicker. And now that we're satisfied with everything, let's delete the faces around this wrist that we had, and then just move it and rotate it to the hand, where we want it for real. And bridge the gap. Now the whole body is done, but I'll teach you one more little thing. Since the hand is such a complex shape, it'd be kind of hard to select it all at once if you want to increase its size or move it farther up the arm or whatever. So here's how you can easily select it all. First, go into X-ray mode by pushing this button. Then you can press C to go into brush select mode, where you can select verts using the brush circle it gives you. You could also call it circle select mode if you want to remember the hotkey. Since X-ray is on, we can select through the model too, meaning we can swipe over the hand and select all of its verts. You can also use B to use box select mode, where you drag a box over your selection, but I personally use C more. And another thing, if you're super satisfied with your hand, it's a great idea to actually save this hand model in a different file so you can actually import it into any new model you make. This is a very common practice for all sorts of body parts. My parts file is filled with a ton of random junk I want to reuse. First, save your current model for real this time, since we need to make a new file. Before that, select all of your hand with the X-ray on and the brush select method I mentioned. Then Shift D to duplicate it, and then P to separate it from the rest of the body. Call it something like hand copy so you can spot it easily. Now create your new file. In the new file, go to File in the top left, and then Append. Appending lets you bring parts of another file into the file you're currently in. When the menu pops up, select your characters file, and then it'll give you all the folders of every piece of data in it. So go to Object and select the hand copy object. Now it's safely in this new file, and you can just append it into any future models. Save the new file, and then back in the character file, you can now delete the copy. You can do this with any parts you want to, like if you like how your head turned out, and you want to reuse that general shape of the head for other characters in the future. Now it's time for the last part of the actual model, the hair. We're going to use a completely different type of object for this one. Up until now, we've only used mesh objects, but this time go to the curves section. Curves are basically lines that you can move the control points of, and then extend a shape along its length. The easiest curve object to understand is the path, which, if you go into edit mode with it, just starts off with 5 control points, which we can grab to edit the final smoothed out curve. Then, in its curve settings in the properties panel, if you go to the bevel section and increase its depth, you can see that we actually create a cylinder along the path, which will bend as we move the control points. Since hair is made of strands, you can obviously see how this is useful for us. But if you look at these top buttons here, you can see what shape we're extending along its length. The first one is just a basic circle, but the second one is what we really want. This lets us select an object to use instead, so we have tons of control over what the shape is. it actually needs to be another curve object. So let's make one. The most useful one for this, in my opinion, is just adding a circle. Remember, it needs to be a circle in the curve menu. First, let's apply it to the path so we can see its effects in real time. In the path's curve settings, go to Bevel, Object, and then select the Bezier circle in this box here. It's a bit big, but we can edit that later. Now go back to the circle and go to Edit mode. Now you can see all the handles that make up its shape. This handle type of curve is much more common throughout the program, so it's a good idea to know how to use it too. It's hard to explain, but basically these sides of the control points sort of pull the smooth curve out in their direction, and it gets smoothed out based on the other handle's positions. So if we pull this one handle out, you can see it extends its side of the curve, but it still smooths back to fit with the other handle's position. You'll definitely get used to how it's used just by using it. I don't think words can really help much here. And the new shape can be seen along the path. Moving these handles around changes the shape, and then instantly updates the path. So we could technically just use a plain circle to make the hair we want, but I actually think it's more appealing to use a sort of oblong football kind of look. It's also more useful for showing us how curves work. One way we could make it is just by scaling down one of the handles on each side, which creates a sharpened point since its handles aren't pulling the curve out that much. Then we can move the other two handles in to flatten it out. This is basically all we need, but I also want to show you another way to make it since it's nice to know. If we select a handle, we can right click it and then in Set Handle Type, select Vector. This change lets us control each handle end individually, and it will create a sharp point in the center of the handle. You can also press V to bring up that menu instantly, if you want. Now we can turn both of these sides into vector handles, and then we can pull in both sides. If we select both and scale, we can actually scale them both in evenly, which is usually a better idea than just ad-libbing each side. Although it doesn't work when you scale some other ways for some reason. You have to scale them individually then. Mirror modifiers don't work in this case. Since I want the curve to taper in here differently, I'll move the two vector ends outward on both sides. That's good, but I want to show you a thing that I won't use, but could be nice to know. If you grab these 2 points and duplicate them, it'll create a new curve bit outside of the rest, which you can edit separately. As you can see on the path, it's sort of floating off of it. This is a decent way to get some quick extra strands on the path, if you're ever going for a slightly less stylized look. But again, I don't want them here. They're too much. Another thing is making an inner crease in the circle. If we take one of these vector curves and pull the handles outward, you can see it leaves an inner crease in the hair strand, just in case you want that sort of look. We still have some controls to learn. Obviously our character's hair isn't going to be a giant tube, so we need to scale the tube inward. But if we go into edit mode with the path, scaling doesn't seem to do anything. That's because we need to use Alt-S to affect the tube being produced by the path. Normal scaling only moves control points around, so we can Alt-S scale in the tips. You can also type while doing this, so the best way to make sure it's perfectly closed at the tip is to type Alt-S 0, which will scale it down to 0. The whole thing is way too big, so you can hit A to select it all, and then Alt-S to scale it all down. You can also go into edit mode with the circle and scale it down to change the overall size, but they both have the same effect in the end. And the very last thing, we can actually twist the shape around the path. If we select a point and hit Ctrl T, it'll twist the shape. You can really go full spiral with this, but we only need to make slight twists to polish the overall shape. Those are the main controls. Let's start putting the hair in. The look I'm aiming for is basically a sort of 12-year-old drawing a bald character look, where the hair will just kind of extend off of the head, so I don't actually need this many control points. Thankfully, you can just delete them. I'll only need 3 control points, but you can extrude more off from the tips if you need to. I'm going to move the object origin point to the head, just to keep things clean. It'll take a while to add them all and get them right, but the process is pretty simple overall. I noticed the strand isn't thick enough, so I just scaled out the circle. Just L, then Shift D to duplicate to add a new strand, and then move and Alt-S scale the control points into place, and Ctrl T to twist until it looks right. I can't really describe the full process since a lot of it is just what might look good in the end, but at least this is what the reference is for. And I'll extrude one out so it goes back into the head. And then a couple at the back of the hair to give some detail there too. A lot of it is just to make a good silhouette. The material will help blend all this together. Also, I shaded the reference so that the edge of the hair shadow is where that strand's side tip was, so make sure those line up. Or just do whatever you want. You can't see everything in the reference, so add strands until it looks good. That's good enough for me, but of course if you want a full head of hair, you could just add more. If you do add more, you might want to create a separate path and circle and give some strands a different shape of hair to add some variety. The bevel section applies to every path inside of the object group, so that's why you need to make a new object to achieve a new shape. Here's one hair tip that doesn't involve curves, but you should know. Even when I'm using curves for a full head of hair, I like adding a sort of scalp underneath it all to make sure none of the head peeks through in some of the parts of the hair. This is also useful for making some more flat parts of stylized hair. I add it by just selecting the general scalp area of the character, Shift D to duplicate it, and then P to separate it. Now we can add a solidify modifier to it to create some volume. If this part is going to be a bigger part of the hair overall, you can just push and pull the verts, or extrude a few more, to make it a more appealing shape. Maybe even adding a shrink wrap modifier to make sure it stays exactly where it should on the head. Just remember to put that modifier above the solidify modifier, like I mentioned before. So that's pretty much the hair done, or at least let's just say it's good enough for now. One lesson I want you to know is how to turn it into a mesh, since you can usually get a much more perfect shape with the hair as a mesh, even though it's a great idea to start with the curve to get the overall shape down. And of course you need to do this if you actually want to rig the hair for real, instead of it just being glued to the head, which I'll do for this tutorial. It seems pretty simple at first, just right click the path, go to convert to, and then select mesh. But look at that. By default, curves use a ton of geometry, so when you convert it to a mesh, it'll keep all the geometry it used, but we can undo that and go back into the settings. At the very top of the curve settings, you can see the resolution. So if we turn it down to only like 3 or something, you can see it greatly reduced the number of loops going down it. So let's convert it again, and why is this part still so loop heavy? Well, that's because the path resolution only applies lengthwise. If we want to reduce the loops going around the whole tube, we need to reduce the resolution of the circle too. Thankfully, it has the exact same style of settings. So if we turn that down to 3, now if we convert it, it should be way more manageable. Although, I honestly prefer going down to 2 resolutions sometimes, especially for shapes like this, which are so simple, so I'll do that. This is way nicer. This is one of those cases where you might want to create a duplicate of your hair while it's still a path, in case you want it later. I'll combine hair path and hair mesh. Then I'll just hide the path and its related curve. I usually have a separate unused collection for things like this. Now we need to apply a subdivision modifier to this, since it's now a normal mesh, which might shrink it down and smooth out the edges too much. Alt-S scale them out a bit to get back some of that thickness. Also, the tips probably open up a bit from us Alt-S scaling, so we should actually merge these points with M. Now it's closed, but it might be a little too smooth, so the way to make it sharp again is to edge slide an edge towards the tip, adding a loop behind it so it keeps its shape. Since merging verts like this creates triangles, for some reason the program doesn't like adding edge loops to triangles. Also, add creases to the side tips of the hair so they get sharp again. Even adding a sharp edge too. The biggest benefit of doing this is to let us connect these hair strands, as you can see with this other model of mine, But in this case, we don't need to do that. I just wanted to let you know. And one last thing, just to let you know it exists. Blender does have a lot of tools for making more realistic hair, where you can actually make thousands of hairs for your character. I definitely don't know enough about that to teach you it though, and I think it would look terrible on a character this stylized. But if you actually want something more detailed, just know it's there. And that's all the physical modeling done. In the next part, we're going to deal with materials, and even add an outline to him. Then rigging will be after. But since you've gotten used to the start of the character modeling process, I'll quickly recommend where you should look if you want to get a bit more advanced with your model. Jaco's Poly Modeling Characters and Ultimate Guide to Character Modeling are great places to see how to build more high poly and detailed characters. The first one is more of the same process, where you just build out your character, but the second one involves creating a sculpt of your character, and then building polygons on top of that model to make it animation ready, which lots of professionals do. Both are worth your time if you want to go to the next step of character modeling. But again, we'll be continuing on with this character, so see you next time for materials.